And here we have some early violets coming up. You really have to get to know this plant because it is kind of ubiquitous before it flowers. And you can see that it's a heart-shaped flower, or a heart-shaped leaf plant that kind of curls in like a tight, it comes up as a tight curl. And you can see some here just unfurling as they come up. And they have a very light texture. They're good in salads, but for a beginning forager, for a beginning person looking for wild edibles, I would kind of stay away from violets until the flowers come up, and you can definitely tell. And as a matter of fact, there are some flowers right there. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a flower before it's bloomed, and it's a kind of a deep purple. Sometimes they're even white, or a light lavender. So that's about to unfurl. But as you can tell, this plant has its own sort of characteristic and look and feel. So I know it on the landscape. And it's just because when you spend time out looking at plants and getting to know them, you pick up their little characteristics, their nuances. And so the telltale sign is how you have the heart-shaped leaf and how it curls in like so. This is another edible plant, early spring edible plant that you can add to salads. And the flowers, the little violet flowers, make really awesome candy. Here's a patch of violets that are just starting to bloom. And you can see the purple flower. It's a violet flower, and you can see the heart-shaped deep green leaves that are unfurling from a trumpet shape as they emerge from the ground. And there's more purple flowers as they start to bloom. I'd give these a couple of days and then they'll start to bloom out, and they'll just be like a nice little specks of purple on the landscape. And they, here in my region, they pop up for about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks maybe. So there's a short time window of harvesting violets and violet flowers. And right here next to violet flowers, or the violets I should say, is we have looks like a first year burdock plant coming up. Burdock is another wild edible known as gobo in Japan. And we'll talk more about burdock, but I just wanted to show this because usually when you're looking for one plant or discovering one plant, you come upon another. And there's lots of plants around. Not all of them I know or have been able to identify yet. But you know, that's the beautiful process of this, is this discovery. And right now there is Articum lappa, or burdock, growing next to some little patches of violets. More violets. There's some white ones here. Here are some purple ones over here. They're totally popping up against the landscape. Very pretty and very tasty. And see, even just amongst the grass versus among the hedge groves along the creek here, there is a violet growing up. So wild edibles are all over the place. You know, looks like some violets coming up there. And here's some dandelion right there. There's some red clover in this clump of violets right there. And the red clover is this plant right here. The clover Or it's got the tri. In fact, its Latin name begins with Trifolium, I believe. And you can kind of tell because it's got the 3 leaves. Looks like a shamrock without the 4th leaf, but it's kind of got that light green stripe in the center. And when these bloom, they make the very nice and sweet red clovers. And you know, these leaves are edible too. Not much for taste, but they're not going to hurt you. Here we are coming up on Minnehaha Creek in the south part of the city. And you can see along the landscape what I'm seeing, and I don't know if the camera is doing it justice, but what I'm seeing is lots of like a nice deep rich patch of violets. And there are some flowers already coming up. And the flowers themselves are not necessarily always that purple color. There are some white ones, like I mentioned, coming up. They have a little splash of purple in the center. But you can see kind of how the leaves are turning in consistently. So that's how I know it's a violet plant. The green leaves. You can see this all the way as it goes to the bank of the creek. And there's other plants that are coming up. The one thing about early spring is many plants look the same when they first start to come up. So it's really hard to identify, and there's lots of hard to identify plants and we have a positive identification at an early stage unless you really get to know or follow the plant. Here, what I'm going to zoom in on is some jewelweed, young jewelweed that's coming up. And jewelweed is right... This is jewelweed, right here where my finger is pointing. This is jewelweed. And jewelweed has this really cool covering that causes dew or water to really bead up on it. And let's see if I can get a close up there. That's the young jewelweed coming up. And jewelweed, for medicinal purposes, is a very good plant for poison ivy, for stinging nettles, for bug bites. It's very soothing. And the stalk is succulent and grows fairly tall, maybe about 5 to 6 feet that I've seen. And they have little nodules growing on them that contain, excuse me, their soothing liquid. But as you can tell, once I zoom out a little bit, they kind of melt into the backdrop, and they kind of look like any other young plant coming up. There's a patch right there of jewelweed amongst the grapevines. And you can see from a distance, you know, you really have to just spend some time and just pay attention and look. And these plants' characteristics will start to stick out at you, and so you won't be so easily confused by picking something that's not what you're looking for. So, but this is jewelweed, right there. And here's a patch right there. That's jewelweed, and you can see the dew beating up on it like little jewels.